I don't think it's crazy to say that the Resident Evil remakes have all been great thus far.
For the most part, at least.
Now here's a weird fucking door.
They're all quality gaming experiences that stay truthful to their original counterparts, and maintain their core gameplay elements while also shifting to a third-person perspective. It's the Resident Evil 2 remake that introduced me to the franchise, and I've become hooked ever since. So why not show my love for the series by ranking the remakes from worst to best? Resident Evil 9 is on the horizon, so in the meantime, we'll be revisiting the past where it all began. We will rank all the remakes 1 to 4. And before we get started, these rankings are just my opinion. Just wanted to throw that out. So now without further ado, let's get started. You know, I had to replay Resident Evil 3 Remake for this video, to refresh my mind since it's been so long since I last touched it, which isn't the case for the other remakes. Well, now I know why, because Resident Evil 3 Remake is terrible. Hell, I couldn't bring myself to get past the hospital section. Nemesis, who's supposed to be the ultimate threat, can easily be taken down with one grenade. Not only is he easy, but to make matters worse, he feels awful to fight against. Every time I died to him was either because I got stun locked or because the camera prevented me from seeing him. Like, I need to be able to see what he's doing before I can process that it's time to press dodge, you know? Also, I think it's worth mentioning that the game has way too many scripted chase sequences that break the flow entirely. The game has many issues, but I think the biggest one yet is that the game feels way too linear for a Resident Evil game. Not once did I find myself exploring the levels or even go out of my way in the slightest to go search for an important item. Unlike RE1R and RE2R, I'm never running around searching or unlocking new paths that get me closer to an important key item. To give you an example, I'll use Carlos's hospital section as reference to show you how much its linearity hurts the experience as a survival horror game. You make your way in the hospital halls and finally reach the second floor. On the second floor, there are two rooms with a door to unlock. One of these doors requires a key card to unlock, while the other requires an ordinary key. The linear problem appears once you realize that you can't acquire the key card without acquiring the key, meaning the way to go is by jumping over the window and getting the key. So there's basically no exploration needed whatsoever. By entering the rooms that are required for you to progress, you would have gathered 95% of the resources of the level without even having to really look for it. It's all an illusion, to make you think you're exploring even though you haven't been backtracking if not ever needed to. And I think it's part of the reason why the game feels so short. So yes, this is without a doubt the worst remake yet, and for that reason alone, it's getting placed at number 4. Now this one isn't by any means close to the poor quality of RE3R. It is way better and an incredible game for that matter. It's the game that made me fall in love with the franchise, so I'm going to take this opportunity to praise it for all its glory. Unlike RE3R, I'm navigating around the police station desperately looking for supplies and key items. I'm mapping my way around areas to avoid enemies. In RE2, I feel like I'm trying to survive. Resources are scarce and enemies are difficult to put down. They can waste almost if not all your ammo if you aren't careful. The G-Adults are a great example of that. They are massive and take up all the space in tight corridors, pushing you to use an offensive option instead of avoiding them, because there's nowhere to run. Also, Resident Evil 2 is a much gorier game than RE3R. Popping a zombie's head has never felt better in a Resident Evil game. Now for the elephant in the room, Mr. X. I honestly think he's one of the best parts in the game. Having him be a constant moving threat throughout certain portions of the game adds another layer to think about when you're playing. By the time you get to this part, you've already gotten accustomed to the map and probably killed most zombies. But when he shows up, you're pressured to think about your navigation a lot deeper than if he hadn't shown up. He also creates some of the most stressful and chaotic moments in the game that forces you to get creative. And I love that even in pro level speedruns, you still must face him. He is truly unescapable, all around a great stalker enemy. One complaint that I have about Resident Evil 2 is that the laboratory feels too short. It's not like it doesn't have its moments, but I feel like it could have benefited from having more rooms to explore. But other than that, Resident Evil 2 Remake is incredible. Okay, I'm not going to lie, this was hard for me to decide. Both Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 4 Remake are perfect games in my eyes. They're both games that are amazing for their own reasons, but I chose to put RE1 at number 2 because I just don't see myself playing it more than RE4. I mean, come on, I have well over 500 hours on RE4 compared to just over 100 hours on RE1. But Resident Evil 1 Remake is the perfect survival horror game. The enemies and the number of resources that you acquire are all balanced. The combat is slow but strategic, and the whole game has a creepy and atmospheric feel to it. The game is framed with wide angles, all the while limiting what you can see coming ahead. But it does lead into more disturbing lore with the addition of Lisa Trevor, which was absent in the original. Her story is very disturbing, and it makes you feel sympathy for this monster that was once a little girl. Her character is unique compared to the other characters in the franchise and makes her presence that much more impactful as a result. Also, this game's main area, the Spencer Mansion, is very big. There are so many rooms to explore, key items to find, and doors to unlock. It feels overwhelming even after 100 hours later. The game does a great job at making you meticulous in your exploration, and gives you enough freedom in what order you solve puzzles while not letting you do all of them. Unless you acquire a specific key that allows you to progress that much further.
Unlike RE3R,
where there's only one order to solve the puzzles. In Resident Evil 1 Remake, it allows you to get creative in your approach of the levels. I honestly don't have any complaints on Resident Evil 1 Remake, so let's move on to the number 1 spot. Resident Evil 4 is quite possibly my favorite game of all time. Before that, the original Resident Evil 4 was in my eyes the best game ever made. But after the remake, I haven't been able to go back. They took a more survival horror approach by not giving you as much resources as in the original, but they didn't sacrifice the intensity of the action in favor of a more traditional survival horror experience. In fact, they somehow amplified the action even further in the remake. And the result is a unique Resident Evil game experience that stands on its own from its original counterpart. Now, I'm so happy they didn't tone down the difficulty for newer RE fans. This game makes you go up against the Ganados, which are even more aggressive this time around and show up in even larger numbers. And this change in enemy behavior encourages you to use the new parry system that now comes from your knives, which are now breakable. This change is awesome, as it grants you more offensive and defensive options in combat and adds another layer of resource management. So now you'll be thinking to yourself, man, should I repair my knife before this big fight? Should I use my knife to stab the chainsaw guy and deal massive damage? Or should I conserve it for later? This is the type of decision making that makes Resident Evil games really engaging, and Resident Evil 4 Remake is filled with them, especially on higher difficulties where supplies are even more scarce. Also, all the weapons are amazing once fully upgraded. They feel powerful, but never too overpowered to the point where it breaks the game's balance. The island section is also a lot better and a lot more fun now. I love the part where you look through the biosensor scope and discover that one of the regenerators has the key item you need inside of them. And then you later get ambushed by Ganados with dynamite that might free the other regenerators and leave you overwhelmed. I don't know, I always found that part really cool in the remake. But now I want to know what you guys think. Comment down below your rankings of the remakes and which one is your favorite. And with that being said, see you guys later.